Performance and Budget Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Pete Pillinger, Chair of the committee. We have committee members in the Civic Centre along with officer support. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube and will be available on the Council's website. Some housekeeping for those in the Civic Centre. No fire drills are planned, and if the alarm goes off, please leave by the emergency exits at either side of the room and congregate in the car park. Please turn mobile phones off or silent and switch your microphones off when not speaking. For those joining us via Microsoft Teams, please remain muted and indicate at the appropriate time when you'd like to speak, and I will bring you in. And we have one member of the council, Councillor Unsworth, currently signed in. I'm grateful for that. We are a little thin on the ground in terms of members of the committee, and we'll be even thinner on the ground by 7:30. So I'm hoping we might even finish the committee before then. Are there any well, there are apologies for absence. Councillor Will King has been substituted, thankfully, by Councillor Karen Walton. Councillor Deborah Ashton, Councillor Bollenberg have not been able to find substitutes due to problems in their homes at a late stage. Councillor David Howarth should be substituted by Councillor Angela Turner, but she's not here yet, so I'm not certain what's going to happen with that. Those of us who are here, do we have any declarations of interest? Thank you. The minutes of the meeting on Monday the 14th of September, I've read through them. I think they're accurate. Does anybody have any comments to make if you were at the last meeting?
Content to support that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So it's proposed and seconded. And it's the... Thank you. And so we will move on. We have the minutes of the Joint Scrutiny Committee meeting on local government reorganisation held on Monday the 10th of November. There are a number of us who were at that meeting who are here now, but I certainly think they're accurate. Does anybody have any amendments? Or are you seconding, Councillor Ward? Thank you. Thank you very much. We have the committee keeps a record of its questioning that has been made in the past. I am grateful to those who have reported back. We have a number of items that we've asked that have been had expanded explanations from officers concerned. Grateful to you for doing that. If you're around or listening in, is there anything that we need to bring up on those meetings? In which case, I will move on to the next item of the agenda. It is good when we have those questions where people do respond. Sometimes I look at them and think I wish that had been in the original report, but that's the purpose of scrutiny. So we have the South Ribble Q2 Performance Monitoring Report 2025 to 2026, presented by Councillor Matthew Tomlinson, Leader of the Council, and supported by Carolyn Wolfenden, Director of Change and Delivery. We welcome to you. Would you like to introduce yourselves and what I haven't done, which is normally we introduce each other?
Yes, we've got Holly tonight.
Sorry, it's Holly. I'm sorry, Holly. Before we move on to that item of the agenda, I've named myself, but I wonder if my colleagues would like to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Michael Green, it's my privilege to be Vice Chairman of this Scrutiny Committee. And whilst there's not many of us here this evening, I'm sure we'll do our best to add value to the work of the administration. Thank you.
Councillor Walton, would you like to?
I'm Councillor Karen Walton and I represent Farrington West, and I'm substituting tonight for Councillor Will King.
Thank you.
I'm Dan Cranshaw, Head of Democratic Services.
Ben Story, Democratic Service Officer.
I will then pass on to Councillor Matthew Tomlinson and Holly Walmsley. Have I got the name right?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sure. Oh, I'll just give Andrew a sec to take a place. Yeah, we are a bit low on numbers. We've had a couple of last minute. Thank you, Chairman. Now it's.
Sorry, can I just stop you for a moment whilst we get the committee settled in? Can I say, Councillor Turner, there are some, in your papers in front of you, there are some questions which will have your initials against them. Oh, okay, thank you. So we've already done that in the pre-meeting. If you could look at those as we go through, I'd be grateful. Thank you. Yeah. So back to you, Councillor Tomlinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's my pleasure to introduce this report to the committee. This is our monitoring report for Q2, where we go through a whole series of measures against which we judge our delivery and our progress. Just some headline things. I hope the committee agrees with me. It's a very positive report with lots and lots of green on the RAG ratings, which is always a pleasure to see. Point out there's a couple of blue ones now, so there's a couple of things that are actually signed off and finished. Jubilee Gardens next door, which, as we all know, is now welcoming its first residents, and apart from a few snagging issues, it's a done deal. We have a committee called the Capital Programmes Board that meets once a month or so, just to check on the things like the town deal, like Jubilee Gardens, like Penwitham Master Plan, that's all coming to fruition. And Jubilee Gardens has been on that committee's agenda for a couple of years, and I'm delighted to say at our last meeting we agreed to take it off because it's no longer part of the remit of that group. The other blue one is the local plan. So we're up to date with where we should be, and in fact the emerging local plan is up for examination. I think that starts tomorrow in Preston, and over the coming couple of months will be looked at before a final submission. So they're signed off, they're done, and I'm grateful to all of our staff who've worked so hard to get that done. When you move on through the report, then really it's not a sea of green and a sky of blue, but it is almost entirely green. I will refer very, very briefly to because we do tend to look at the exceptions in the reports, the red ones, the one about customer satisfaction. Remember, we discussed it last time about how do we judge it, how do we know who's telling us what they think of the council, and it tends to be people who've reacted with the council on some issue or other, and we ask them what they think, and we've always said, well, how many people is it, how do we know? And you'll see in the report it does actually say how many people it is, and it's a tiny number really. And you'll recall also, I said at previous meetings, we need to get better at encouraging people to take part, and I think in the report somewhere there's a brief explanation of some of the ideas that we've got around that. So hopefully, whether that means the satisfaction figure will increase or not, only time will tell. But certainly we do need to get the numbers taking part to increase. And the other red one really is the one about staff sickness. And again, that's one that is a stubborn, it's not miles away from where we want it to be, but it's not where we want it to be. It is a very small number of people though, and I think that's the point I would make. But we continue to support those people. We continue to make sure that people can come back as soon as they're ready to come back, and more importantly, to support those people who are genuinely not well enough to work at the moment. I don't intend to say any more than that. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. If they're really complicated questions, that's why Holly's here.
Thank you very much. I was going to say, if you were going to ask questions, I don't know where we'd get the answers from. Before we dive into the report itself, and following the corporate strategy discussion at Council on Wednesday, could you talk us through the process for setting targets, how members are involved, and how do we make sure they are robust for quarterly reporting?
Okay, I think the robustness bit, I'll hand over. So do you want to answer that first, and I'll come back on with the stuff about members?
So I think one of the really important things that we do at the council is look at benchmarking. So when we're looking to identify where our organisational performance should be, we are looking at organisations across the North West and sort of across the sector. Obviously no organisation is identical to South Ribble Borough Council, and we take it in sort of in the round, and we look at our former performance as well when we're looking at setting those organisational performance metrics. We also have our suite of KPIs has a set of criteria set against it. So every time that we establish a KPI, we are looking to make sure that that has got robust data sets that's behind it, that there is a checking procedure, and we have a system where that is entered, then checked, and then signed off. So that's kind of the process that we go through when we're establishing and then when we're inputting and checking KPIs.
For the sake of the public, KPI?
Key performance indicator.
We are terrible at that, aren't we? And I apologise to anyone who may be listening or watching. Local government has its own language, and we quite enjoy talking to each other in that language. As far as that members are concerned, obviously the corporate strategy is just, as you said last week, being re-adopted and refreshed. So we like to think that people have some buy-in to that and have the chance, whether it's at a scrutiny meeting or at the council meeting, to come forward. Obviously within the ruling group there's much more, let's be honest, there's much more opportunity for people to feed ideas into that. But we, you know, these are things that we discuss throughout the year before coming forward with our final plans. Talking about key performance indicators, KPIs from now on, you know, we have in the past changed them and reacted to whether our what we're trying to achieve has changed or been tweaked. So they're not necessarily set in stone, but they are there to give us a good idea of how well we're doing against the targets that we've set ourselves.
Thank you. Councillor Green?
Thanks, Chairman. Good evening to both of you, and thanks for attending. Can I touch on Jubilee Gardens, which the leader mentioned in the introduction? And I think the council, our staff and our partners can all take credit in the construction of that facility, and it's particularly pleasing to receive awards, as we've heard recently, for the design, etc. of the building. Could you give us an idea, please, how many apartments have now been occupied in Jubilee Gardens, and by when can we expect all the apartments to be occupied?
So my understanding is that 14 have now been occupied, or certainly have been offered out. Lorraine, sorry, mentioning members of staff in meetings, I do apologise. Our manager of that facility has always said that she wants this to be a phased implementation. She would, you know, aghast at the thought that 75 people would turn up on day one to take occupancy. And her expectation is around 9 months till full occupancy, and it will be in a phased approach, probably floor by floor, but that's her expectation, and to be fair, always has been.
So effectively by about June sort of time next year, just to give us.
I always get nervous when scrutiny committee members give me a deadline, but 9 months was her expectation. So yeah, certainly by the end of the summer, we should expect it to be full.
Okay, thank you. And are the projections with regards to income and expenditure still on track?
yeah, it's been really pleasing. We've still got some final snagging to do, but the last report I got back on the budget for this was we hadn't used any of the contingency that was set aside, so that's really, really pleasing. And so in terms of a major project delivery, I think it's gone as well as any that I've been involved in, and it's credit to Caddick Construction, who are our partners, and to the staff here who've kept such a beady eye on the work that's been done. But yeah, projections. And so in terms of projections for the future, we can only look at the other facilities like this, and obviously our friends at Chorley have had a very similar facility for a number of years now, and it operates on a 99% plus occupancy rate, and there's no reason to expect we wouldn't do the same. You know, we're oversubscribed on the first tranche of applications, and if we thought it was a sensible way, we could fill it very, very quickly. But 75 places, we certainly had over 150 applications from South Ribble, so there's no reason to suspect it won't fulfil every financial projection that we've made for it.
Thank you. Councillor Walton.
Thank you. Good evening, Councillor Tomlinson. Good evening, Holly. My question is on page 42, paragraph 23. Reference is made to the South Ribble Leisure Centre's refurbishment being completed and handed over by the end of October. So has all the refurbishment of all the leisure centres been completed now? And has there been any feedback from the customers of the leisure centres over what changes have been taking place?
So I would say 95% complete. Now there's a couple of snagging areas. At Bamber Bridge, we're trying to feed in a new electricity supply to support the decarbonisation project that we've got there. And we're waiting for North West Electricity to hook us up. Apparently we need to be hooked up to somewhere that's 400 or 500 yards down Brindle Road. So that's causing some delays, but we're in their hands. And at Penwitham, we're negotiating with the school and the county council about a tiny little piece of land we need to put the heat pump on, which is not currently in our control. Certainly at Leyland, apart from, I think there's a couple of issues with vinyl flooring that's not up to standard, but certainly at Leyland I think we're done. And we're going to have a big publicity push in the run up to Christmas, because we know that people tend to join the gym in January. That's just the nature of gym memberships. So we're going to have a big push. We're already getting really positive feedback. The leisure company is returning figures, you know, better than we thought it would, which, to be fair, they've been doing even while some of the refurb has been going on. And it's really pleasing that our subsidy, because we give the leisure company a subsidy because it doesn't, you know, it costs us to have our leisure centres, but the subsidy is probably halved in the last 2 years. So it's a really positive story, and the investment that we've made has made, you know, our leisure centres fit for the 21st century, and has been really, really well received. And I would compare and contrast that with people not that far away that are really struggling with their corporate leisure services. So again, really, really pleasing.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Councillor Green.
Thank you. Not so much a question, Chairman, but I'm just wondering whether Scrutiny could actually visit the leisure facilities at some point and see what improvements have been made, which I think might be helpful in terms of our wider role.
And I'm happy, I'm sure Darren will facilitate that. The Cabinet are going, actually, we haven't got a date yet, but we've also said we want to have a good look round. You won't be surprised to hear that Councillor Hunter is a regular visitor to our leisure centres, but we have said as part of that publicity push, we want to get some members to visit them and see exactly what's happened. Yeah.
Thank you. On page 46, which is about the participatory democracy project, where it's the People's Assembly is being on hold as it exceeds the current budget. Could you tell us how that budget was set in the first place? What was, why we thought that budget was going to be sufficient, and whether there are, which direction this is going? It seems to me you either give it a bigger budget or you reduce your expectations. But where are we on that?
I can't answer the first bit of your question. Maybe Holly can. And I think I know that a couple of our cabinet members were really keen on this idea, and I know you've been running a long-running scrutiny investigation into how we get people more involved in the work of the council. I don't know how the original budget was spent, but the feedback that we got to try and do what we would have aspired to do, frankly, was more than we were prepared to put towards it. So what's happening now is there's some investigations as to how we can do things slightly differently, perhaps just to roll back on our expectations a little bit. I think, expectations versus budgets is always a tension for everybody. And I think we have to be realistic sometimes and say that, yes, we had some very worthy aspirations to do some really interesting work around here, but all the evidence that's coming back is it's likely to be prohibitively expensive. Perhaps Holly can.
When we originally scoped out this project, we spoke to a number of different councils that had undertaken similar work, and they had always identified a partner that they were able to work with, who was able to fund it, and we had hoped that we would also be able to seek that additional funding. Unfortunately, that hasn't been available to us, and so we've used available budget via UK SPF, and we'd put that to one side. It did, unfortunately, seem to be woefully little compared to the broader cost. Now, there may be opportunities through local government reorganisation for us to do a project in conjunction with partners, and that would enable us to use the budget that we've got and to use their budgets to do a project collaboratively.
Sorry, thank you very much. On the digital panel, how representative will that be of the borough? How will we approach those people who are digitally excluded? I just wonder how you actually square the circle of people on the digital panel and those who are digitally excluded.
If I'm really honest, I can't give you a specific answer on this one, but I think generally, and we were discussing this today, we will never be an exclusively digital council. We recognise that for some of our residents, the digital world is not as easy to navigate as it is for many of us. However, as people do become more and more digitally savvy, more and more people know how to access things via the internet or our Facebook page, for instance. We're getting a lot of interaction on our Facebook page. Digital will become more and more how we work, but we're really keen to emphasise we will always leave a space for people for whom that's not appropriate.
Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. If I could just pick up on that, I actually welcome that point that we don't wish to exclude any residents in Southfield. I think it's really important. It's something Scrutiny has raised in the past, so that's to be welcomed. And just the comment about the People's Assembly, etc. I mean, it's disappointing that we're not proceeding because expectation was raised that we will be doing that. But I have to say, if the costs prevent us from doing it, I'd rather see the resources spent on services than on a project like that. So I think we've got to be realistic ultimately.
And maybe that the scrutiny working group that's working at the moment can assist. We will perhaps put that on our agenda and see whether we can find any extra resources or make any suggestions in our research so that you have a little bit of extra going in your direction in terms of brain power. Can't guarantee anything, but it's the sort of thing that needs to go into that panel. Councillor Turner. page 3, question 6.
Thank you, Chair. Page 47, Penwith Master Plan. The master plan has been going on for some time now. What engagement has there been with the County Council on the project? And why are they developing their own scheme? There's 2 sub-questions. How typical is it for there to be a lack of coordination between the County Council and South Ribble? And Kingsfold is mentioned as part of the master plan. Does it take into account the Champagne derelict site that Councillor Burrows raised at full council? How does the council deal with derelict land more generally? Thank you.
Gosh, well, part of that question, I couldn't have written it better myself. And I did notice Councillor Turner had a wry smile on her face as she was reading it out. Can I just say the Kingsfold and Middlefirth parts of the Penwith Master Plan were now out to procurement. So we're now looking for someone to actually do the work. So that being said, by the summer, we should see something progressing on those 2. You're right in the terms of the Liverpool Road bit. It was a bit of a surprise to us to find out. We've been talking about a master plan for Liverpool Road for 5 years, maybe 4. And it was a total shock to us to find out that the County Council were also looking at a scheme to deliver in the same area as well. Councillor Howarth's not here, but if he was, I'd be thanking him for his intervention with the County Council, because it has helped bring things more to light. And I'm really pleased to say that we're now talking to each other about how they can support our scheme, rather than us deliver a scheme in the next 18 months and then the County Council to come a year later and dig it up because they want to do their own scheme. How typical is this? It's very typical. It's very typical. So I'm going to give a real world example so we can all roll our eyes and tut. Just outside here, there's a zebra crossing across at the top of the bottom of Lancaster Gate that was, I would say, one of the worst surfaced road junctions in the borough for a while. County Council resurfaced it just before the County Council elections. And now that we've built Jubilee Gardens, they're saying that we have to put a pelican crossing there and we're going to have to dig it up. Now, I would suggest to you that if this was a unitary council, either the pelican crossing would have been put in at the same time as the resurfacing work was done, or the resurfacing work would have been delayed until we were ready to put a controlled crossing in. But sadly, that's where we are. It is enormously frustrating, and whether things change in local government, certainly that's one of the things that ought to improve. The Champagne is in private ownership. They've got planning permission to do something. That being the case, unless there's a danger to the public, we would be loath to intervene. That doesn't mean to say we never would, but any intervention from us would probably need to be quite lengthy. So if we wanted to, for instance, pursue a CPO, that can be a 3 to 5 year process. So I think our intentions at this stage are to encourage the owners to get on with the development. Obviously, planning permission will run out. I think planning permission lasts for 5 years. Have they? Right, yeah. So obviously, if they make a start, then they've made a start, and that remains the case. We can engage with them, we can talk to them, we can encourage them. But in terms of, anybody saying we're going to get on there and sort it out, I think it would be disingenuous to say we could.
I note in my own ward, Ockleshaw House stands as an eyesore on the corner of Fox Lane, and I guess as a empty property, we can use some of the council tax augmentation to encourage it to be brought into use. It makes me wonder whether we can put in a dereliction addition to empty properties in the borough, or might consider. But where you've got a property that isn't developed, there's no property there to put council tax on over in Penwitham, is there? So there really is nothing we can do except lobby Parliament for more powers for local authorities, I suppose. Councillor Green.
Thank you. I can take Councillor Tomlinson to page 51 and to look at sickness of employees, which is a matter that he referred to in his introduction earlier. And noting and agreeing with the leader's comments that obviously these are human beings that are involved and it's not always easy. But nevertheless, if you look at the sickness levels at South Ribble and compare them in the latest available benchmarking to our closest neighbours, I don't mean geographically, I mean the councils, for those watching, the councils that are most similar to South Ribble. If you compare the figures to those councils, our figures are nearly 25% higher in terms of employee sickness levels. So my question is, what do those other councils do that we don't? And how can we learn from these other councils to improve this indicator moving forward?
Thank you. I think, you know, whilst we do try and benchmark against what I said to be similar councils, we'll always be comparing apples with pears, because I think the question was, what do they do that we don't do? And I think it's sometimes it's what they don't do that we do. So our waste collection service is in-house. So they're our employees. So if someone hurts the back or catches the flu because they're out in all weathers, that will impact on our sickness figures. If that service is outsourced, like many councils will outsource it, that will not count towards the sickness figures. And similarly within leisure. So we've insourced deliberately because we want to look after those staff, and we think those services are best delivered by council staff. But in doing that, we have to take on the risk that those are the type of type of jobs that are far more likely to result in musculoskeletal injuries and things like winter illnesses such as colds and flu. Now, I'm not for a moment suggesting that's the answer. I'm just suggesting that's possibly one of the answers. And it is, we're not unique in that, but there aren't many councils. I mean, even next door with the vaunted Preston model, their leisure services and waste collections are still outsourced. So we are slightly unusual. So I think it's always difficult. I think, you know, our target, we're not that far away from our target, and our target is set with the knowledge of all those things that make us slightly unusual. But, you know, it's still higher than we want to be. We do engage with people regularly when they're off sick. We're not one of those organisations that when someone signs off, they're just left until they come back. We do offer them what support we can, as I said in my initial comments, to make sure that they are helped and encouraged to come back just as soon as they're ready. But yeah, it's not where we want it to be, and we acknowledge that, and we must try harder.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you for that answer. Would it be, I mean, obviously we've all got the wish to get these levels down and to do everything we can, but given the points which Councillor Tomlinson has raised, I'm just wondering whether we could look at separate figures for the services that we run similar to other district councils, and a separate figure for those services that you made reference to leisure and waste that we have insourced, and see how that compares with the private sector, and see how the figures for the other services provided by similar councils compare, just so that we can see exactly what we're looking at and see if there's any room for improvement and further movement on any of these. Notwithstanding, obviously, we are a caring employer, and we've got to take into account the needs of our staff, but we do need to also make some progress on these figures because they are not where they should be. And can I just move on related to this? What impact does hybrid and home working have on sickness absence? Is there any positive or any negative impact?
I think we'd have to get somebody else to answer that second bit. I'm certainly not qualified at the moment to answer that. In terms of the first bit, I'm sure that we can examine where in the authority sickness is occurring more than others. I would just warn some caution because the numbers are really slow. We're talking about 11 short-term cases and 8 long-term, 19 people in. What I want to do is narrow it down so much that we can easily identify who these people are, because sometimes sickness can be a sensitive thing that needs treating carefully. But I mean, in principle, can we have a look at how people who are on a frontline physical job and how their sickness compares with people who maybe work in this office? I think that might be a really useful piece of work.
Thank you. I think we're not asking for a regular report of that sort, but actually it's an indication for the officers concerned to be able to use that as a and thank you for your response, positive response. On page 60, about affordable housing, the report mentions the project progressing over Q2, but doesn't say very much about how it was progressing.
Sorry, what page was it? 60?
60.
60.
This is in the tiny typeface stuff.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah, I'm with you now. The middle band. We are, as you know, we've now got over 100 council houses, and with Queen Street coming on board as well. So we're being proactive ourselves, but we're also working with social housing providers. What we do know is there's a real issue in South Ribble. As I said at the council meeting on Wednesday, our waiting list is predominantly for 1 and 2 bedroom accommodation, and that's exactly the type of accommodation that we struggle to provide. We have got an options paper currently being developed by officers. It's not yet been considered by Cabinet, but it will give us some ideas of how we can progress this. It's something we're really keen to do, really keen to get involved with. I think I was very careful on Wednesday to say I don't blame the house builders for this. They can't make money by building 1 and 2 bedroom houses. And at the end of the day, whether it's Roland Homes or Barrett's, they have to make money. That's what they exist to do. They are not charities. So that being the case, it really is, it's up to the government and to us to intervene, to provide what we can. So there is an options paper being progressed, and I'm expecting that to come to Cabinet quite quickly, and then we'll be able to discuss more widely amongst the council what our options are, and then we can get on. But I'm really keen that we do this work and we do it at pace.
Was that bit of work partly a response to the Scrutiny working group on housing and homelessness in the borough? And secondly, are you considering what options there might be to for the council to have a bigger stock of emergency accommodation so that we're not paying to private sector providers for emergency accommodation?
Exactly that, Chairman, and that's one of the issues that I think actually we can move at pace on, because having had a look round, there are some options for temporary accommodation. If the last thing we want to do is put a family in bed and breakfast, but at the moment, sometimes that's what we're still having to do. That costs us approximately £1,000 a week. Now, I'm quite a simple soul, but I can add up, and I think that's £50,000 a year, 150,000 over 3 years, and you could buy a small terraced house, frankly, and have it just for. So again, we're talking to both Preston and Chorley, who have their own emergency accommodation provision. So whether we go on our own or whether we share with Preston and Chorley, but certainly us having permanent temporary accommodation that can be accessed when people do become homeless for a short period of time is one of the things that I've been talking to directors about, because I think we can do that fairly quickly. And yes, it did come out of the scrutiny review, there's no doubt about it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Green.
Thank you. Can I take you to page 61, please? And there's a reference to youth provision in the borough. And it's good to see the positive feedback regarding youth provision in Bamber Bridge. Could you go into a bit more detail what's actually that comprises of at the moment, and are there plans to extend this across South Ribble?
Thanks. And I think I have to say, youth provision is not a statutory service. It's not ours to provide. It should rest with the county council. But that being said, where we see a problem that we can help with, we will always try and help. And the reason why we've concentrated in Bamber Bridge at the moment on this is there was a huge spike in antisocial behaviour, a huge spike in Bamber Bridge on antisocial behaviour. And people will know that at Withy Grove, for instance, we've got a fabulous park, we've got the football facility, and we've got a leisure centre. And just across the road, there is a county council family hub as well. So it did seem to us that there's a real potential there with physical stuff that's already there for us to intervene and try and work with the Police and Crime Commissioner, because he's on board with this, to get some work in there to see if we can help with the antisocial behaviour that's happening. So we've had discussions with Onside, the people behind the youth zones. Whilst I would love us to have a youth zone in South Ribble, we're a long way from that at the moment. Never say never, I would say, but we're not at a stage where we can identify a site or the funding for a youth zone. But what Onside, is it Inspire at Chorley? It's called Inspire at Chorley. They are in the market for doing some outreach work. And it's interesting that a new youth zone is about to come on board in Preston, and there's one in Blackburn. And so Bamber Bridge is in quite a nice geographical spot there to reach out to all three of those to see what outreach work can be done. So we've been out, we've spoken to young people about what they want. Councillor Hunter is, as you can imagine, really keen that we progress on this. And when we've done we are doing some work, and when that work's been done, we'll do a proper assessment of it, see what's worked and what's not, and then see whether it's something that we can roll out further.
Subsidiary question. If youth work is a responsibility of the county council, are they fulfilling their responsibilities, or might they even pay us to do their job?
I think they would say yes to the first bit. They would say that legally they are fulfilling. And to be fair, it's better than it was. The family hubs that have come back on board. Councillor Green and I can argue all night long whether they're as good as children's centres in Sherwood used to be, but they are undoubtedly an improvement on what was in place. So I'm sure that they would say, the county council would say they are fulfilling their statutory duties around this. Whether it's enough, I'm sure that most of us would say it isn't. Do I think they're in a place where they'd be willing to pay us to do that work? I don't think they are.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously it's a while since I've been involved in scrutiny, and the plan we're going through here. If I can take you to page 62. So the way I'm looking at this is, I think part of your question, the discussion before talked about things that, youth provision, probably to prevent antisocial behaviour. And we've got the graph here against happy and healthy communities, and it's green. But I'm struggling with this because I know quite recently in Penwitham, and I know this isn't really measuring this criteria of safety. However, we've had a number of issues take place in Hurstgrange Park, and I know we mentioned it at full council, and we have got residents writing to us now saying that they're worried about going into the park because of antisocial behaviour. So, although here the criteria for this happy and healthy communities is measuring that we've got an action plan and that we're talking to some of the key organisations that can probably, it feels like it's a preventative method. And and that's green, but in reality, as a resident, as an end user, as it were, they're giving us feedback that they're frightened of going out into Hurstgrange Park, particularly because there's been a lot of antisocial behaviour which culminated in a knife attack a couple of weeks ago. So I'm like thinking, we don't have anywhere the number of antisocial behaviour occurrences we have in the borough where we can look at where the clusters are, and we can also see where that antisocial behaviour quantity of incidents has perhaps come down. I suppose really that I'm not actually putting a question to you, I'm just making the point that in the corporate strategy project it talks about the action plan, which is about prevention. However, there are a lot of ASBs in our communities, and whether they're being actioned and whether they're being closed down, because obviously if that was an action on here, it couldn't be green. We've got schools now writing to parents saying don't use Hurstgrange Park. So we've got an issue of antisocial behaviour that's minority ruining our communities for other people, and I think it's an issue, and I think maybe it should be logged somewhere, or maybe it is already logged somewhere and I just don't see it on here, but the authorities should be able to see how these ABSs are affecting our communities and whether there is prevention in place, which there clearly is in other areas. I'll stop there because I'm just going around in circles, I think now, but I think you get the point. You're a bright guy.
I do get your point.
You get the point.
I do absolutely get your point, and I should have said actually, to commend the town council, because I know they're doing a lot of work on antisocial behaviour, and I know that the MP and the Police and Crime Commissioner have helped with some funding, and I always get the organisation's name wrong, so forgive me. Kickstart, is it called Kickstart? Who do some really great work and are working with some families in Penwitham. I think, what I wouldn't want anybody watching this to think that they can't go into any of our parks. I really wouldn't want that message to be, but undoubtedly, we do get spikes of ASB. At the end of the day, the responsibility for that lies with the Police and Crime Commissioner. It's not our job to police antisocial behaviour, but where we can, we'll do some work to help minimise that. Now, that could be through youth provision and diversionary activities. It could be through the sort of things that Councillor Farnworth mentioned at Council on Wednesday. And I think it's got to be a suite of options and different approaches, because if there was a single way to stop this sort of behaviour, it would have been invented in the 1960s when the mods and rockers were fighting in Brighton on Brighton Beach, and it wasn't. So I think it's a multi faceted approach we have to take, and to recognise that we will do what we can, but we're not always the answer to all problems.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. On the Leyland Town deal, this is on page 64, with the number of vacant properties around Huff Lane, is any work being undertaken to review the proposed uses of the new units that we will be developing, and where will further information be known on the public realm improvements?
So in terms of the units that we are going to be building on what is now Eckroyd Street car park, the information I'm getting back is there's already quite a bit of interest. So certainly our estates team are still very bullish about our ability to fill those. So at this stage, there's no reason that we should be concerned. And I know one or two existing people who are already doing business in Leyland see that as being an opportunity for them to expand the business offer in Leyland. So at this stage, I'm not overly worried about whether we'll fill the commercial aspect. In terms of the public realm, I think I've indicated before how complex that is, and in my conversations with officers, I'm encouraging them now to perhaps break up the work that we do along Hough Lane into sections, rather than say we're going to come down on April the 1st and stay for 3 months while we do it all, because we're still not able to contact every single landowner, simply can't get contact with everybody. So what they're looking at the moment is breaking into those sections where we can get in and do work, and so it might be a slightly more, one might say piecemeal, the other might say a gradual approach to the work on Hough Lane, so that we can get in and do something and show people, look, this is what it's going to look like. I have suggested that if there are parts of Hough Lane where we simply can't do work at the moment because of permissions, then we just don't do it, and we might have to revisit that at a later date. That's obviously, you know, that's not what I want, and I know it's not what this council wants, but we can't keep delaying the work for everybody because we've got a couple of spots that are just not responding to our approaches.
Thank you. Michael Green, Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I take you to page 76, please, and the indicator on payments to suppliers within 30 days. Pleased to see that there has been some improvement in that figure, but what further can we do to improve the figure even more, to support businesses by paying them promptly, because as you'll be aware, it's a difficult environment for businesses out there at the moment, and anything that we can do as a council to assist, we should be doing.
And it's our aspiration, you know, it's in our control, it's us and it's our departments. So it's about making sure that the paper trail is clear, the accountancy work is done correctly, because, you know, I used to run a small business. I know what it's like getting money out of people when you've already done the work, and how you begrudge the 30 days, never mind longer. So we are keen to progress it. I'm delighted it's getting better. But ideally, I mean, I'm sure an officer would shoot me down, but I'd like that figure to be 100%, if only. But it is in our own hands, you're absolutely right. And it's about us being smarter. And sometimes things do slip through the net, and that's because sometimes our processes are not as robustly followed as they should be. But it is within our control, and we will get to that figure.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members not on the committee? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor. Before we move to that, Councillor Wald.
Thank you, Chair. It's just going back to question about the Leyland Town deal, and you said you were building on Eckroyd Street car park. As I was involved in Leyland Town deal, is there going to be provision of extra car parking spaces in Leyland because the building on Eckroyd Street, and to encourage residents to shop and enjoy the new facilities that are being created? I know we're trying to encourage people to use the bus, but having experienced buses today going into Preston, it's not always convenient to use the bus because the services aren't always up to scratch, if you know what I mean.
So there will be a small loss of car parking spaces, but we're building on Eckroyd Street, but providing some car parking spaces on Queen Street. So when the new build is all done, you'll be able to walk through from Queen Street straight into the square. So there will undoubtedly be a small loss of spaces. Can't remember the figure, but it was small. But all of the assessments that we did as part of the town deal show that there is a slight over provision of parking in Leyland Town Centre. So it's very, very rare you go on any of our car parks and they're completely full. With the new one that we're providing, we think that the loss that is going to happen can easily be absorbed.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Just a couple of, obviously it's very pleasing to hear that there's procurement for Middleford and Kingsfold and the development there. And obviously people have waited some time for it. Some of it's explained and others don't always understand sometimes the processes that we go through. Just on the Champagne development as mentioned, do you think perhaps we should start looking if we're getting a developer in, and obviously from this experience it may be a one-off or maybe a few. I mean it's 4 years it's been empty now, to this more or less to the day. Should we then perhaps invoke some sort of like developer community standard or something like that a developer will look at trying to improve the community that they want to foist their services on or their buildings on, rather than just sit there and wait until it's financially viable for them. The other part is about obviously the sickness record. Sickness record is very touchy. I know from my employer that there's a lot of work goes into it and trying to reduce it, and it's not always, it's not academic as such. One of the things that was introduced was like an employee support scheme. So it was like a free phone number where employees could ring up. I was wondering if that had been implemented or if there's anything like that. And one of the advantages of that is you can sometimes get a bit of a picture of what's going on. You don't get precise information, but you'll get general trends, and that's something you could adjust. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're describing an employee assistance programme. So we do have an employee assistance programme that's available to all of our employees. We also go a step further than that, and we have a counselling provision, so our employees are able to access direct counselling with a local provider within the South Ribble area.
And again, when it comes to the Champagne site, I mean, you know, developers are in the game of making money. They will buy a plot of land and develop it as and when they see fit. You know, the biggest land bankers in the country are house building companies, we know that. So we'd love to see that developed, we'd love to see it smartened up. But again, you know, we are not the answer to everybody's problems all of the time, sadly.
Thank you. I don't think there are any members of the public to ask questions, which brings us to the end of this particular bit of business. But before you go, as leader of the council, one of the areas which the Scrutiny Committee has flagged up internally is, and this should be a yes-no answer, is local government reorganisation and the opportunities it may give. Does the Cabinet have on its agenda any work coming up as to what this council may do in preparation for local government reform to make the most of the opportunities that it might bring?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Very grateful. Sorry about that last question, but it was going to be short, and we do need to move on to your successor. But very grateful to both of you for the time you've been able to spend. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the recommendations the committee might like to consider. The committee thanks the leader and head of service for attending and answering questions. The committee welcomes and commends the progress made against the corporate strategy projects and performance targets. The committee congratulates everyone involved in the development of Jubilee Gardens and completing the project within budget. The committee looks forward to seeing the refurbished leisure centres at the proposed scrutiny visits. The committee welcomes the commitment to the digital panel project, also putting measures in place to include those digitally excluded. The committee asks that consideration be given to breaking down staff absence figures by operational and office-based roles for comparison purposes. The committee welcomes the success of the youth provision in Bamber Bridge and asks that this be extended to other parts of the borough. Thank you, Chair.
Is the committee happy to accept those recommendations? Yes. I think we've got a vote on that in favour. Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for your time again, and we welcome Councillor Wesley Roberts and sorry, I ought to have this on my in front of me as to who I'm welcoming. Neil Holton, who is Director of Finance. Councillor Wesley Roberts is Cabinet Member for Finance and Assets, and we are looking at the Revenue Budget Monitoring and Reserve Report as at the 30th of September 2025. Welcome to this committee. I'd hoped we might have got to this stage before this evening, because we do have a limited time available. But within that time, would you like to say a few words of introduction?
Yeah, evening all. Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say a few words to keep it brief. Conscious of time, as you mentioned, but thank you to the officers who put this report together, and also the earlier report that was noted on Worden Hall. And while the kind of picture of local government finance is a bit of a mystery in terms of the future, I'm proud to kind of say that the current position as of 30th of September is looking good in terms of accounts that were fiscally resilient and could sustain a shock if there was going to be one to the organisation, and we're on a forward trajectory in terms of our journey of sustainability. So just to point out a few things that you may have noted is we're establishing a budget for the closed graveyards piece of work of £100,000. That's in response to two things. So the first one being is that the audit of how much that work was going to cost has been completed, and also the recommendation from Governance Committee, as Councillor Smith pointed out the other day at full council. So that budget is established. You'll see the overspend is 137,000 predicted. It's come down from the last quarter report, and we anticipate it maybe staying a little bit steady, maybe come down slightly. General reserves still over 5 million, which is positive. One other thing to point out that I've previously spoken to committee about, which is at point, it's on page 82, bullet point 2, around the shortfall in trade waste income compared to budget. Just want to reassure the committee that the team are looking at how they can get close to budget, but that team does contribute 60 grand to the kind of position. So if we were to stop doing that service, the position would get worse financially for the council. So, but the team are working on that. But that's all I'd like to say at this moment, Chair, and happy to take any questions the committee have got.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Just for members of the public who may not be aware of the situation regarding graveyards, this council does not currently have any municipal graveyards, unlike some councils. But when churches and other organisations that have graveyards fill them and therefore close them, they become our responsibility. This has happened in one particular case that's led to expenses that we were not fully aware of when we started doing the work, and so we are making appropriate plans. I'm grateful to you that you have outlined that the plans are being made. You've also mentioned the overspend, and I think you've answered my first question already, so we'll move on to Councillor Walton.
Thank you. Good evening, Councillor Roberts, and good evening, Neil, again. My question is on page 80, it's the second bullet point about the overspend on Worden Hall. And we've been supplied with a commercial strategy for Worden Hall, but how was the income target set that is forecasting an overspend of around 77,000? What can we learn with regard to setting income targets, and how is the work progressing on the promotion and development of the hall?
Thanks, Councillor Walton. So in terms of the 77 forecast overspend, it's an accumulation, and I do apologise if it's not been brought out in the other paper a bit more clearer. It's an accumulation of the service charge costs to the council. So some of the service charge costs are met by our commercial partners, or the cafe, etc. And then we're responsible for some elements of it. So it's that, and it's the gap in income, target income. So that's where them two numbers align. So just to tell that story a bit more holistically. In terms of the paper that was previously put, the team have worked really hard in trying to be pragmatic and realistic about what is achievable, using the expertise in the team to not just put a finger in the air targets. In terms of the original targets that were put in, I think that was in around 2022, and at that point, I would say, and I think others would say, that there wasn't necessarily the right expertise in the organisation to make a well-judged kind of assessment of how many weddings would be achievable, a new wedding venue in the first year, and there was a lot of kind of wedding figures baked in. So in terms of, I think it's a fair question for Scrutiny to ask, why are we not changing the income targets if we know there's a gap? And I think there's kind of two elements to that. One being, if we're not meeting them already, then is it realistic to set a more stretching target? And then two, kind of the element of staff welfare as well, and kind of encouraging them. What I say is, in the report that came earlier, there's a lot of things in there in terms of qualitative stuff that we're heading in the right direction, and they kind of were trying to kind of move towards sustainability and cost neutrality, and I'm quite confident that the numbers will start to kind of add up and kind of move in that direction as well. I hope that answers your question. Maybe there was one at the end that I didn't quite capture.
Yeah, it was, how's the work going on the promotion and development of the hall? The promoting of it as a venue that people can hire for weddings or whatever it is.
Yeah, so in terms of the promotion side of it, there is a bit more detail in the previous paper, which I was just trying to get up, but there has been some open days. I think there's been 2 so far, so open wedding days, and there's been bookings on the back of them. They're also going to various wedding shows as well. There's also, believe it or not, there is unfortunately, but maybe this is because people see it as a community asset, that it's become a bit of a popular venue in terms of market of wakes, and the team are actually engaging with funeral directors around offering it as a venue for people who may want to see that, use it for that purpose, and then also the kind of social media change. So I don't know if people saw we're doing a Meet Santa event at Worden Hall, and it's with the train and engineers, which is great. But what encouraging thing for me was that there was a second session put on, because we sold out the first one and we sold out the second one. So I think the team are, really, I think I've got a grapple of what we're trying to do. I think there's a budget set of 10 grand from the UK SPF funding for this financial year. And I think that it's not going to be a static thing. The team will chip away at it, and I think the paper outlined that you saw earlier that long term, medium to long term, we want it to be a wedding venue, and we've got to establish it as that. But in the kind of short to medium term, there's the focus on driving towards achieving the income targets, which is focusing on that conferencing side and improving the IT there, and also kind of the celebration of christenings and wakes, etc., and parties.
Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Good evening to you both. The problem for me is it's yet the latest overspend on Word and All. So it's not a one-off. It's time and time and time again. We keep seeing overspends on that facility. By when can we expect there not to be any overspends in the future?
I sense frustration, and I think it'd be fair to say that we share it as well. And if we had time again in hindsight, we may have done things differently. But we are where we are, and we're kind of dealing in that reality. I think it's probably, I wouldn't necessarily put something on it now, but I would come back to committee, because I was talking to Caroline earlier, who was here, Director of Transformation Change, and talking around that kind of how do we get to cost neutrality. I think the paper outlines in the table on page, I think it's 127 in the addendum pack, that we anticipate 26-27 being 20,000 over our income target, that would still leave a gap of about 22,000 towards our service charges. And also what's not taken into account in that is the price of staffing for kind of for the events. So there's, whilst we're moving in the right direction, there's still a bit more understanding to be done the end of this financial year and going into next financial year around what the staffing models are for certain events and then what the cost of that is. And then we'll be able to actually, what I'd like to be able to do is come here back with Neil and say the cost of neutrality and to make sure we're sustainable is X. And at the minute, I've not got a total confidence of what that figure is. And there's an element where we wouldn't be able to fully tell you what it is because we wouldn't know the staffing costs and that would vary and fluctuate. And I think this is the kind of element of running a business within a council, isn't it? And it's that kind of adjusting, and we've got the right business operating model, I feel, now. In terms of cost neutrality of it does this, it's the income target plus the service charge, isn't it? So it'd be £135,000, then the cost for staffing. So it's going to be in that ballpark, varying of staffing costs. And also, the other varying element is the staff are trying to predict when they have a certain event, what they take on the bar, which you can only kind of make a best guess element based on the number of attendees that people are telling you have got. So there's an element of variation, but there are some set things where we can kind of go, well, to run the building, it's going to cost £135,000, and some of that's made up by commercial spaces. We're hoping to, the bit that was upstairs, which was originally the community space, that's just not viable as a community space in the sense of it wasn't accessible. That's why people were kind of basically saying they didn't want to book it. So that's why we're looking to rent that out on a commercial basis, which will also help towards the cost of neutrality. So I hear your frustration, I share it, but I am determined to grip it and also, provide Scrutiny with reassurance and assurance that we're moving in the right direction over our MTFS.
Thank you about that. I think you can be assured that Scrutiny will continue to scrutinise this particular issue. Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Turner to...
Yeah, thank you. So, first question I'd like to ask you is, going back to what you've just said, is there a business plan for Worden Park? And if there is, can I have a copy of it? Okay, you'd have to answer that now. My second question is page 80. I'm struggling to understand this question myself. Bullet point 1, which I think talks about page 80, paragraph 19. Sorry, yes, paragraph 19, communities and leisure, bullet point 1. Okay. And I have read that paragraph, I'm still struggling. But anyway, please could you talk us through to an overspend on staffing costs being due to being fully staffed? I don't understand.
Yeah, so within our budgets, we do something which is, I think it's fairly common in local authorities, which is assume an element of vacancies during the year. Now, we apply a 2.5% rate to that. But what that means is in some teams, if they are fully staffed for the full year, that target isn't hit because we don't have that element of vacancy during the year. See, yep.
Sorry, Neil, when you say vacancy, I don't even understand what you mean by that. Can you just put that into context? Staff vacancy. Yeah. Are you talking about being off sick? Right, okay.
So a staff vacancy is when somebody leaves the authority, that creates a vacancy in a post. So usually we anticipate that during the year there will be some element of turnover of staff. Now, that isn't applied consistently across teams, but the way we forecast it is around 2.5% of the staffing bill in each team. And often it's accommodated by a staff member resigns, there's a bit of time before the new person's recruited, so there's 1 or 2 months salary saving as a result. in this instance, we haven't had any turnover of staff. So as a result, we've got that overspend occurring because ultimately we've had no vacancies.
Can I just interject to say it's a bit like being bumped off a plane when they've overbooked because they assume that some people won't turn up.
Yes, pretty much, and it's a fairly standard convention, I think, across local government. I just think the percentage often varies in each authority, and in bigger teams it works better because clearly in a bigger team you're more likely to have a vacancy.
Right, so I think you said we haven't had any vacancies, but we had our commercial monitoring officer left, so that must have been a vacancy.
Sorry, this is specifically to those teams who are in communities and leisure.
Right, okay, forgive me, that's my... I don't normally attend this meeting, okay. Right.
Thank you. Regarding the level of our general reserves, which are somewhere around 5 million, a little while ago they were 4 million, how do we set that?
So, Councillor Tomlinson does remind me that we agree at the point of the budget, and full council approves what it is, and they've agreed it should be at 4 million. So currently sits at 5, which is nice and healthy. But that's how we come to it.
I think the only thing I'd add there is there's no set guidance on what that number should be, so it isn't a number that is set in legislation or a percentage of anything. The auditors do take a view though on whether there is sufficient in that fund, and we've took the view that 4 million is sufficient, and they've agreed with that over recent years.
Thank you. And what is the community wealth building reserve held for? That's page 86, paragraph 29, 7th bullet point.
I'd need to check. I think there is a specific post that it used to relate to, and there was some support to the credit union, but specifically I'd need to go away and check.
If you would like to return that to us, we'd be very grateful. I think, are there any questions from other members or members not members of the committee? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, it's just a thank you, really, because we just prior to this meeting we attended a bit of a briefing on. So I learnt about brackets and other such marvellous devices that accountants use within local authorities. So I sort of believe that if possible, maybe we find a dummy's guide to council finances, because even though we've tried over the years, what we'd like to see is more engagement of members of the public, which I can't see. So I think it might be worth just trying to elaborate on that and make it a bit easier to do, because I mean, very rare I attend governance because a lot of time I just don't get it. It's not my bag, so to speak. Others it does, but for me it doesn't. So to have a bit of if there's a mechanism we can try and sort of like make it a bit softer for residents.
There are actually some very good videos by the LGA, which explain in an animation sense of local government finance, which I think they shared earlier this year, but there are some that have been around a while. So I'll get the links to those and share those as well, because they're really good animations for the kind of basics of local government finance.
It might be worth having links on our website for the general public to access those. Could we go to our recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. Some of the recommendations that the committee might like to recommend from tonight. The committee thanks the Cabinet Member and Director for attending and answering questions. The committee welcomes the reassurance that Worden Hall will remain a focus in the journey to cost neutrality. The committee asks for further information on the Community Wealth Building Reserve, and the committee thanks the Director for the offer of further information being provided on local government finance. Thank you, Chair.
Is the committee happy with those recommendations? I think we have a unanimous vote. Thank you. Welcome back to part 2 of your attendance to the 2025-26 Capital and Balance Sheet Monitoring Report as of the 30th of September. We've welcomed you already. Do you wish to say anything about this particular item of business?
I was only going to say a few bits, but it's up to if you'd rather me not. Yeah, no, it was just to say the position. as of 30th of September. Basically, the changes are outlined on page 97, so the budget variations, the majority of that is the town deal, which we talked about at full council around the cost coming down of that project. There is a little bit of an increase in budget in the unit for Middlefirth industrial unit, which when it's gone out to tender has come out at a higher price. And then the reprofiling in terms of slippage due to weather or due to kind of the time it'll take to procure for that project is outlined at table 2 at the bottom of page 97. Other than that, that's happy to take any questions.
Thank you. On page 96, paragraph 11, thank you for the detailed information on why the capital budget has been reduced in March, June and again in September. As you mentioned, is there any way in which the capital budget, when it's agreed, could be more accurate?
I think it's a constant challenge we should set ourselves in terms of making sure that our capital programme is deliverable, and deliverable within the year that we say it's going to be. I think there's always going to be things that are out of your control, but predominantly speaking, you want the majority of your capital programme to be delivered when it can. I know the town deal's a bit of an exception to this in the sense of what the leader said at full council and various things, but I know that Neil and the team worked really hard in trying to make sure it's accurate. And I know whilst there was a big change, I think it was it Q1, so it was from the outturn to Q1, that was the officers and our approach to try and really be quite prudent with what was deliverable and upfront early in the year, rather than holding it back to the end and then going, oh, we're changing it, reprofiling it to next year. I think it's obviously by saying it each time in the report, every time it comes, it kind of looks like we're potentially not we're kind of not doing as good a job as we could be, but actually the Neil and team did quite a lot of work between outturn of end of 24 and 5 and Q1 to make sure it's accurate. I think the big change, well, it's a big variation this time, is just because of it's the first time in quite a while where the budget's gone back for the town deal to full council, which shows the costs. So I wouldn't anticipate any major reprofiling or budget variation next time.
Thank you. Can I pass on to Councillor Green?
Thanks, Chairman. If I can take you to the bottom of page 99, we'll just talk about the Treasury consultants. Could you tell me how the Council's Treasury Management consultants are appointed and what mechanisms are in place to assess their performance, please?
So the Treasury Management consultants are procured, so it's an annual kind of procurement and we review that each year. There's a relatively limited pool that work closely with local government and understand local government in that sense. We have been out kind of and looked at other providers, but fundamentally it's a procured service. In terms of the performance and how they work for us, we receive regular emails from them, we speak to them regularly. We are providing Treasury Management training to all members in January. They obviously help and assist in kind of that information and provide that. But fundamentally, it's ensuring that they provide the data that we need that supports the Treasury Management mid-year report that will come to governance this week and the various other reports. If we were not receiving that information, we fundamentally couldn't produce the data and the reports that we do.
Thank you. Councillor Walton.
Hello again. I want to ask a question on page 100, paragraph 34. Cash balances have decreased due to capital grants. So what is in the medium-term financial strategy about the Council's borrowing requirements in future years?
I think Neil might want to come in and add to this, but we've been quite fortunate in the council where we've received quite a lot of government grants up front, so we've been able to do a lot of borrowing internally. I think we've always been clear that there will be a tipping point at some point when we borrow externally, and we were clear with that in the town paper deal that came to full council. I think it's either two. I think Neil's working quite hard with the team, but I think we anticipate it being probably next financial year where we'd externally borrow.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Have you got any idea of, how much will be the borrowing requirement?
Neil can come in on the specifics. I think it depends on, like you say, the cash flow and various projects and when they're procured and whatnot. But I'm sure we could provide. Neil might know now and can provide a bit more.
I mean, in terms of borrowing, as Councillor Roberts says, it is depending on cash flow, so it is forecasted well into the future. In our current MTFS, which was obviously approved in February or March, but that has no assumption of it. We do think that we will need to move to it over the next period. Slightly, that depends on what comes out of the local government finance settlement and where we stand overall, but it looks more than likely over the next MTFS there will be an element of it. It's absolutely not at the start of next financial year, so it's when in that year comes. When we do borrow, we tend to borrow in lumps, so it would be probably we borrow 10 million because you would borrow in that lumpy nature of it rather than piecemeal over time. But yeah, it's certainly, we will have to borrow over the next 3 to 4 years, certainly, more likely the next 18 months or so.
Yeah. And will that be reported on these documents?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll be in those tables.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not suggesting that Councillor Walton is doing this at all, but I just wanted to talk about, in terms of debt, there is sometimes a bit of a misconception of how local government finances work, and we are, in a lot of our plans, buying assets which do have an income in return, so we are getting something for that money. And all the financial models do stack up and will be presented in the normal way.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Roberts. I'm well aware of how it works in the council and how the debt works, as I've been on governance and scrutiny for many years. Thank you.
No, I wasn't suggesting at all. It was more for the public. Thank you.
I have a little concern about being quorate, which I was asking some questions about, but we will be quorate when Councillor Green has to go at 7:30. So we will take the question number 4. Councillor Turner, please.
Okay, yeah, good evening, Wes. Page 101, paragraph 37. Whilst it is good news that the collection has increased, are there any other manual systems used as part of the finance process that might not be providing accurate information? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Turner. Neil can come in as well, but I think from my governance days, there was an external audit kind of recommendation around journaling and kind of how that could potentially be improved. But I think as part of that response, kind of in terms of the authority's response to that, was sometimes it's around the scale of the finance team and actually what might be more resilient in an organisation that's a bit larger doesn't necessarily apply to a district council with a smaller team. There might be other things that Neil wanted to add, but that's the only one I can remember.
In terms of manually calculated figures, absolutely there are manually calculated figures, usually in terms of estimation more than kind of directly, because clearly actual figures are actual figures, but it's usually around things like bad debt provisions and things like that where we use still spreadsheet-based things. We are hoping in the new finance system that we will do away with a lot of spreadsheets with it. It is supposed to be a move to a new system, but there are manual processes there. Obviously, they are audited in the same way that all of our systems are audited, and they pay particular attention where it's in an individual spreadsheet because they are analysing and making sure that those figures are accurate. So absolutely there are manual processes. It will be wrong to say no.
Does Neil, is it fair to say, is it the new financial system that brings a saving of, is it 30,000 this year and 20,000 next?
So yeah, so essentially through to some elements of reduction in the finance team, ultimately we are expecting that will bring savings because of more automation on the system itself. There is too much downloading into spreadsheets and manipulating in spreadsheets. I absolutely accept that that's the case currently. That's what we're moving away from in the future. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members, any further questions from members before we, any questions from members who are not on the committee? Thank you very much. We thank you for attending, and we always look forward to your presence at the committee. We have some recommendations to recommend.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the recommendations the committee might like to consider. The committee thanks the Cabinet Member and Director for attending. The committee is grateful that more detailed information has been provided on the capital project and the ongoing work to make the information more accurate. The committee encourages members to attend the learning session on Treasury Management scheduled for January 2026. And the committee welcomes the reassurance that the new finance system will help to reduce manual financial processes in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Is the committee in favour of those? Thank you. I think we've got unanimous support for that. Which leaves us to thank you for your presence, and you may go home as you like, or you can hang around for the rest of the committee if you wish to. Couple of bits of housekeeping for us as a committee. Since you are both substitutes, I really think we probably can leave these until a future meeting, because the members of the committee who they refer to are you're substituting for, and there's not really any business we need to do. It's a matter of reporting back. Are you happy that we move? Yes, I don't want to keep you for things that actually you don't know where it's come from and you don't know where it's going as substitutes. So are you happy that we? Yeah, yeah. I mean, the one thing I was going to say to the committee was that the training event from the LGA is always very useful, and 2 members of the external committee a scrutiny committee have booked in for January. If there's still places and either of you wish to go in January, we could make a bigger group from the county, from the borough, to go to the meeting at Warwick University. So I went last year. It's very valuable, very useful time, and a nice surroundings. But the committee dates were the. It's January the. Was it the weekend of the 11th?
No, it was the
25th, yeah. 24th.
25th.
Yeah, it's the weekend of 24th, 25th. If anyone's interested. The details are on the LGA website, but Darren would need to be told if you wish to go, so he can book. Is there anything else we need to do?
No, Chair.
No, in that case, I declare the meeting closed at 7:33. Thank you.